All right, we are recording now. Want to touch base with you about grading. I have gotten through part of the grading, but we are having an issue and IT is working on it. I give you feedback on your assignments, and when I've been trying to submit your points with feedback, the system has been telling me that it's an invalid entry. And if I go out of it, then I lose everything that I've posted on your assignment. So they're working on that. They have promised me that they will have a resolution for it yet tonight or tomorrow at the very latest. And then I'll catch up on grading and get responses back to you. But I don't like to just send you points back without some kind of feedback when you've taken time to invested time in doing the assignments. So that's coming. Let me pull up. Here. This is my PowerPoint for this evening, and it is a fairly simple one because I want us to have time to actually work on some things. So for tonight, I thought we would look at, first of all, I want to answer any questions that you have, but I'd also kind of like to, it's not that I want to cut you off, but let's make that time as brief as we can. And if we have more time at the end to come back and answer questions, we'll sure do that, because I'd really like for us to talk about informed consent tonight. And I have a couple of case studies that I would like for you to be able to review and comment on. So that's my agenda for this evening. I'm going to go ahead and take that back out until we need the. So anybody have questions?
Professor Adams?
Yes, sir.
I got a quick question. LA2, Learning Assignment 2 this week says it's due Saturday night. Is that correct?
No, that is not correct. I do have permission to access that. Stop it. That I can change. Hang on. It won't be due until Sunday night, Peter.
Thank you.
Let me see if I can change it now, and if I can't, I'll make a note and go in after class and change it. That's your informed consent one, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks, Peter, for asking that.
Good question. All right, that's fixed. And yes, thank you, Peter, for asking that question. I read through those, but I missed that. Any other questions? Yes, Justin.
This question sort of came up for me with the Lorenzo case study last week.
Okay.
If Lorenzo was only using like marijuana sporadically, is that an instance where you would notify the parents?
What do you guys think about that?
Is he harming himself by using it? Is he engaging in, like,
I mean, if you weren't engaging in risky or just self-destructive actions while taking it, I don't think it's that big of an issue. If he's smoking a ton of pot and then going out and driving around, that's
Yeah, no, I tend to agree with you there, Marilyn, but I mean, you could make a case that with the developing brain, like use of alcohol or marijuana is a self-destructive
Yeah,
behavior. Like,
and it's illegal still, particularly for minors, or at least most places it's still illegal for minors. One of the things that you would absolutely want to check is what are the requirements for disclosing information to parents in your state, because it varies from state to state. Some states you would be required to tell the parents if a student told you that they were using drugs of any kind. Others you would not be allowed to tell the parents. So the first thing that you look at is, what does my state say? And then as you're assessing as you're assessing the teenager, like Marilyn says, you look at the frequency of use, how long have they been using, how are they getting it? How are they getting access to it? You know, for a lot of kids, it's friends share it with them. And particularly if they're using sporadically. Others are buying from a dealer. And that's always a concern, that whether they're buying from a dealer or whether they're buying from a peer who is selling for a dealer. That's always a concern, because what happens when they don't have money to buy, to purchase. So talk to me about your gut, guys. What does your gut say you would need to do?
I mean, I would want to rope in the parents because it'd be part of the treatment plan.
Mm-hmm. So how are ways that we can legitimately bring parents in on things like this? What kind of conversation do we have to have with a client? What kind of conversation do we have to have with Lorenzo?
I was just about to ask that. I think that is something that confuses me, because if you do bring up having that conversation with Lorenzo's parents with Lorenzo, then it may be that the next time you're slated to meet with him, he doesn't show up. And yeah, I don't know how to balance those two things, honestly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's some risk that can be taken, that you're taking there. Other thoughts? What do you guys think? How would we approach Lorenzo with this and be able to engage his parent?
Seems like it's important to establish early on that, what are the boundaries of informed consent, that it's not unlimited.
Mm-hmm.
That the counselor has an obligation to more than just the client in this situation.
Mm-hmm.
That there's competing values that are at work that the counselor always has to balance.
Yeah. And what would we, in terms of harm to self, harm to others, how would we reconcile this with informed consent?
Well, it seems like it's important to establish early on that, that you're trying to establish trust, that the informed consent is there to establish trust with the client, but that trust has boundaries. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Especially with a minor, that there may be things that need to be disclosed to the parent if there's, if the client seems to be putting themselves in situations where they're putting themselves in harm or other people in harm.
Hmm. No. And, um, you know, say we're sitting with Lorenzo and he has disclosed to us that he periodically uses marijuana. How are we going to engage with him? What kinds of things are we going to ask?
Well, I mean, we'd have to do some sort of substance abuse screening, right?
Hmm?
Like intensity, duration, severity, just like we would do with the suicide assessment. We want to know how often.
Exactly. When was the last time you used? How often do you use typically? You know, under what circumstances do you typically use? You know, are you in, you know, is he in his room? Is he out with friends? And so we get some of that information from him. And then it's appropriate for us to come back. And as long as we've done our informed consent, as long as we've discussed that with the client and the client has said they understand that, then, and none of this has to be harsh. It can all be very attuning there. It's a tuning confrontation. And come back to him and say, hey man, you know, you remember when we talked when we first met about that there were some situations when I would need to break confidentiality. And unfortunately, this is one of those situations. Um, you could be at risk here at the very least. What you're doing is illegal. And so my responsibility to you is to not do anything that could potentially get you in trouble, could land you in trouble. And then how about in terms of talking to his parents? What do I want to? How do I want to handle that?
Seems like it would
I'm-
be,
I'm-
Well,
go ahead,
You can
Justin.
go, Peter.
I was just gonna say, it seems like it would be good if there was a way to get Justin to instigate that conversation with his parents.
absolutely.
Not Justin, sorry, Lorenzo, sorry. Justin.
Lorenzo, yeah.
Yeah.
If it's at all possible, I want Lorenzo to initiate that conversation and do it while I'm in the room. Bring his parents in, hopefully before he leaves that day, so that this is out there, and I have a chance to interact with the parents as well, and maybe kind of mollify the situation a little bit. And again, we're making the assumption that his parents are not aware that he is using. And it could well be that they are already aware that he is using. So what's the main risk of disclosing?
Him not coming back to therapy.
Him not coming back to therapy, him seeing it as broken trust and not coming back to therapy. And this is one of those judgment calls that you're going to have to make. You're going to have to decide, you know, is it worth it for me to continue working with this student, with this young man, and possibly making some progress with him? Is that worth risking my license? Because if it comes out later that he was using drugs and he does drive a car and hurt someone or hurt himself, or if he is arrested for possession, if the police bust a party and he is there, then that you have that knowledge implicates you. And, you know, whether authorities choose to do anything about it is totally up to them. But it does implicate you and it puts you at risk. But I have to tell you that so much of the time, how you attune to the client and how you handle it makes a difference between whether, I mean, you know, the other thing that that comes to mind, that in a situation like this, I'm always aware of, and I talk with the client about, is, okay, you had to know that it's illegal for you to be using marijuana, and yet you chose to tell me about it. So I'm thinking that maybe there's a part of you that really wants somebody else to know about this, and to be helping you with it. You know, because you could have kept your mouth shut. You could have lied to me. You didn't have to tell me. And yet you did. And so, you know, it gives the opportunity for us to deepen that therapeutic relationship. So many things going through my head right now, including that kids are manipulative. And sometimes they will test you with something like that they know is outside of the ethical boundaries for us as clinicians. They'll test you with that to see if you're going to stand up, or if you're going to sweep it under the rug, or make excuses, or whatever. And sometimes that's a test of your integrity. Other thoughts? Not black and white, Justin. I tell what are your thoughts?
I mean, I tried looking it up for New York, and everything I found was so vague as to whether, like, to what qualifies a minor to, like, legally be able to give consent in order to receive confidentiality. It was just all so murky, and there was no clear-cut answers that I could find anywhere. Government websites or like the New York Civil Liberties Union. Everything was so vague and murky that I was left more confused than when I started.
More confused than when you started. Yeah.
But my gut says, like, yeah, as long as I assess that, like, aside from like minor brain damage, like, he's not, like, in serious danger to himself or others, I wouldn't rope the parents in unless it was his call, because like, I would try to, like, help him see the importance of having a good relationship with his parents, where you can say, like, I'm doing something that you might not agree with. But I don't think if I wasn't forced to, I don't think I would break confidentiality.
Break the confidentiality. Yeah. It's a tough one. There are just so many so many rabbit trails out of something like this, particularly with minors. And you're right. Most states don't have clear-cut criteria about what, or if they do have criteria, they're buried under other laws, under other statutes. And that's one of the things that I know therapists here in Indiana are lobbying for, is clarification of boundaries with minors. because there's an ongoing debate about if a minor is sexually active, and if they get pregnant, you know, is the therapist obligated to tell the parents? And, you know, some states, a minor can get an abortion without parental consent. Indiana is not one of those states. And so, you know, it all spears or spurs out and gets complicated. You know, this is why it's so important in situations like this that we have that good, trustworthy network of other professionals that we can process this with, and we can process out the pros and cons, and then make a determination and just go for it. Do what's best for the client, and also what's best for you. Because then you don't want to be put in a position where trying to help one client, your ability to help many other people is stripped from you. So, Fox needs of the one outweigh the, or needs of the many outweigh the needs of the one. It sounds really romantic, but it's hard when you're in the position of having to make those decisions. And we have one of the cases that I have for you tonight is a similar but different case. So some of these things that we've talked about will apply there as well. Anybody else? Questions? So, consent to treat. Anybody found a consent to treat form that you like yet? Yeah. Micheline?
Yeah,
What
I did find one on a site that I thought was well written. And I understand that you put it in your own words, but are we to make it like we are the counselor, like okay.
Like it was your intake.
Okay.
Your consent to treat form in your practice.
Okay.
When we're finding consent forms, can we reach out to like local therapy clinics and stuff to see what theirs look like?
You can
Will that
use
count as research?
any resource that's available to you is fine. And you are going to find just many different formats. Some will be one page, some will be several pages. And that's usually driven by, you know, the other topic this week is malpractice. And so I don't know if you've had a chance to look at what the most common causes of malpractice are. But right up there with sexual misconduct and that kind of thing is the failure to appropriately inform a client. And so you want them to have that information. So think for a minute and let's just talk about what are some of the things that you absolutely want to include in a consent to treat.
Well, I intend to work with children, so I would want to keep the families, if not informed about what we're discussing, just keep them up to date. So I would include clauses like, this is what I can talk to your parents about, and this is what I can't.
Yeah, and that's a good point, Marilyn. I have separate informed consent forms for minors and for adults. And just because of the those requirements about how to include parents in the session, who I can give information to and who I can't give information to. And I'm going to do a rabbit trail here, but this is an important thing for you guys to know. If you're going to be working with minors or adolescents, be sure when that kid comes through your door, you have a copy of who his legal guardians are. Because you will have grandparents who are trying to bring a child in for counseling, and they are not the legal guardian. You will have a parent who's trying to bring a child in for counseling, and they are parents. They're co-parenting. They share custody of that child. In that case, both parents have to be informed if the child is beginning therapy. And you need to inform both parents of whatever the requirements are of your session or of your organization. So, I know that doesn't directly apply to here and now, but I can't tell you how many times through the years I've had people try to bring a child or an adolescent in for therapy, and they did not have guardianship of that child. They cannot bring them in for counseling if they don't have legal guardianship. And you need to see the paper that gives them legal guardianship. You need to make a copy of that and you need to put it in the kids file. Okay.
So they have to be legal guardians just to drop them off for sessions?
No, but to do the intake and to enter them into counseling, then they can, it's like the school. They can give you a list of people who are approved to drop them off for session. But when you do the intake and the assessment, you must be interacting with a legal guardian. I even asked that question. I'm not seeing children and adolescents right now, but I would even ask that question on the initial phone call. Who is this child's legal guardian? And I would tell them, I need a copy of the information or the form giving you legal guardianship of this child. Because I can't even begin to tell you how many times that happened. That somebody other than the legal guardian or one parent where they had joint custody would try to bring the child in for therapy without the knowledge of the other parent. And man, that's just, that's a nightmare waiting to happen.
Mary? So
because-
in the, I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
So in the case of two parents who say are sharing custody,
Mhm.
we would need guardianship paperwork for both of them, and then we
A
need,
copy of the custody agreement would be
and
fine.
then on top of that, would we need them to both sign the consent, or would that be the child, the adolescent signing?
No, that if they're a minor, whoever their guardian, their parent or guardian is, whoever has legal custody of them, has to sign the consent to treat.
So that'd be both parents if it were.
Yeah, if it was co-custody, if they have co-custody, then or joint custody, then you would need the signature of both parents.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions about that? I didn't mean to go on a real tangent on you guys, but that's when I think of something that I know can really impact you legally or in terms of ethics. I try to remember to tell you about it, and that's not something that comes up, I think, in any of the teaching for this course. So intake, or I'm sorry, consent to treat. What kinds of things are important that we have on that consent to treat, would you think?
That confidentiality will be broken if
Absolutely.
a child is in danger, or if you're a danger to yourself or others.
Yep. Yep. You want a confidentiality section that says what you're obligated, when you are obligated to break confidentiality, that says how you maintain confidentiality of clients in your practice. For instance, I do not text with clients about anything except appointments and appointment changes. I don't text anything clinical with clients. And even email, I try to limit the amount of information that comes through on an email. That all falls under your confidentiality statement. I put in my confidentiality statement that my files are kept, well, now they're kept digitally, but at one point they were kept in a locked room in a locked cabinet. And that in most states, that's a requirement, is that there be double lock access to any confidential files. You don't take files, and this becomes more of an issue because a lot of us keep now our files on our iPads. But typically you would not take client files out of your site. Your files, if you are working for an agency, do not belong to you, they belong to the agency. So if you leave that agency, your files stay with the agency. Your client files stay with the agency. And if your clients follow you, then you start new files with them wherever you're picking up, you start a new file. So absolutely, that confidentiality piece is crucial. Can you think of anything else that would be important to?
Wait, can I ask you a question about that, Professor
You sure
Adams?
can, yeah.
So you're saying if you're treating a patient and you're working with a particular agency and you leave that agency, but you would like to maintain a professional relationship with that client, those files are going to stay with the agency.
Mhm. Yeah. When I left Christian Counseling Associates back at the beginning of my career, all of my files stayed with CCA. When I left RAFA, all of my files stayed with RAFA. When I left New Life, all of my files stayed with New Life. They were property of the organization that I was working for. Now, and I didn't have a non-compete clause in any of those circumstances except the very first one. And so in that instance, I could tell clients I was leaving. I could not tell them where I was going. And often if you have a non-compete clause, that will be the case. But trust me, your clients will find you. If they want to see you, they will find you. So don't sweat that one. Just kind of roll with the punches there, because an organization cannot keep you, cannot prevent you from seeing a client that you have already been seeing, that you've previously been seeing. They can do a non-compete clause that says you can't see clients within a 10-mile or a 20-mile radius of wherever you were previously working for a year, or I've seen them as high as 5 years, which I think is ridiculous. But different strokes for different folks. And typically, if you're working in a hospital program, they don't restrict you from being able to tell clients where you're going.
So it's not like a medical file that will follow you wherever you go.
Nope. Although, here's the loophole. Who has access to their file?
Client.
A client that. The client can request and pay for a copy of the file and carry it with them. And then if they come to see you, they can give you the copy of the file.
So would it be considered unethical in that situation where you left the agency and you continue to meet with the client professionally to ask them to ask for their file?
Okay, this is one of those be wise as serpents and gentle as doves situations. The way I handle that is that I suggest to my client that if there's a chance that they might be seeing a therapist at another organization, it might be wise for them to request a copy of their file. I'm not flat out telling them get a copy of your file, but I'm making them aware that that's an option that they have, which a lot of them don't know.
Yeah.
Mary, can I ask you a related question to that? So we have progress notes and process notes, and from just the reading in the Corey textbook, it looks like the progress notes are more about behaviors and things that we witness, but the process notes are more for us. Are we allowed to keep our own process notes as we move?
Progress notes stay, process notes belong to you.
Great.
Those are considered counselor's notes.
Okay.
Good question.
Getting back to your original question, it seemed like one of the things in the consent to treat would be some sort of understanding of the billing or pay structure.
Yes, absolutely. You want to get that clarified as to how much the fee will be, whether or not you will be filing insurance for the client, what the expectation is in terms of how they pay. Do they pay at the beginning of the session? And I'm not going to tell you this happens all the time, but what I really like to do is I like to collect fee and get future sessions on the books at the very beginning of the session. Then that's taken care of. We don't have to be concerned about it. We're not trying to cram it into the last few minutes of the session. Now, I collect my own fees. I don't have an administrator. If you're in an office where there's an administrator, then they're probably going to do that up front for you anyway. They're going to collect the fee when the client comes in the door. Okay, so yes, absolutely. The financial piece of it, including what you do if the client, will do if the client becomes in arrears or is unable to pay. And again, some of that is going to be driven by your agency. I have the option in private practice of being able to say to clients, hey, if this gets restrictive for you, let's talk about a sliding scale. Don't just assume that you can't get counseling. Let's talk about how we can adjust things so that you can continue to get the help that you need. There are agencies around here that if somebody can't meet the fee, they will give them 3 referral sources. And they will explain to them, this is how we work. We'll give you other people that you can talk to and check out and see if they can work with you. But we don't have budge room on this. So again, some of that is going to be dependent on the organization that you're working with. How you're working. Can you think of anything else that might be absolutely you would want to talk with your client about it up front?
I think
really-
Go ahead.
Jody, go ahead.
Oh, no, you're good. I've talked a lot. I'm sorry. You're good.
No, you're totally fine. I was just going to say the use of assessments, why we're using them, what kind of data we're getting, how it informs treatment, how it helps us understand what could be influencing other factors, et cetera.
Yeah, yeah. Make the client aware that you may be recommending assessments, and typically that's what you're going to be doing, is recommending assessments, because clients have the right to accept or refuse the suggestion of an assessment. But it's really important to let them know that if I recommend an assessment for you, it's because I believe that that assessment will tell us something that will help us with your treatment planning, with your recovery. Okay.
I think another thing would be just like conditions of the relationship, letting them know, like, I'll get back to you within 24 hours with an email, 12 hours for it with text, and so on and so forth, so that they know what to expect in terms of communication. And then also what it even looks like to do counseling. This is a co-constructed effort. This isn't something where I'm just telling you what to do, and it can be hard. It can, bring up a lot of stuff that's difficult to talk about. So I know I've worked with counselors who didn't tell me how hard it was, the first one that I worked with. And yeah, I was a little surprised when things came up. So
yeah. And all of those, Meg, are important to include in that informed consent. When you are available and when you are not available, and what happens if you are gone on vacation, who covers for you, or it's sufficient to just say that someone will be providing coverage for me if I am gone on vacation, and then you can let clients know who that person is when before you leave on vacation. When are you available to respond to text messages? You would think it wouldn't be a no-brainer if you saw clients Monday through Thursday from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. or later. You would think it would be a no-brainer that people would realize that you probably are not going to have a lot of time to be returning texts. And but the way we are programmed to think about text messages, what you're going to find is that clients will be really ruffled because I texted you at 9 o'clock this morning, and it's now 1 o'clock, and you're just now getting back to me. I don't, you're supposed to care for me. I needed something from you right then. So make it clear. Make it clear, first of all, that you're not a 24-hour counselor, and be sure that they have resources. Be sure that they have the number for the local ER, for the suicide hotline, for any helplines that there are in your area. If they are in crisis, particularly if they're in what feels to them like a life or death threatening crisis, after office hours, who's the therapist? What do they do?
Call 911.
They call 911, or they go to the ER of the hospital. And if you listen to voicemails, almost every provider's voicemail, whether they're a medical provider or a mental health provider, almost every single one of them has that information of, if you are in a crisis situation, dial 911 or go to the nearest ER. Most clients won't take advantage of that, but you will have some that will call you or text you. Last week I had one who texted me at 2:30 in the morning. And I keep my phone by my bed because we have elderly parents who are sometimes in need. And but I looked at it to just to be sure it wasn't my mom or my mother-in-law. And when I saw that it wasn't that or one of my kids, it got laid back down by the side of the bed and I went back to sleep. I responded to it the next day, but yeah. And a lot of that is clients just don't think, when it comes to their head, oh, I need to talk to Mary about something, or or I'm feeling anxious, then they send the text without thinking at all about what time it is. So being clear about those rules, and my clients know, you text me at 2:30 in the morning, you're not going to get a call back. It's not going to happen. I will touch base with you the next day, but you text me in the middle of the night, I'm not the 24-hour counselor. With most of my clients, we talk about that God is the 24-hour counselor. He's the one who's on duty around the clock. Because I want them to learn to depend on their own resources and not just on me.
Professor Adams,
yes, go ahead, Peter.
how common is it for practicing counselors like yourself to give their clients access to their personal number like that?
Pretty common anymore, because a lot of us, a big majority of us, use our cell phones as our business numbers.
Mm.
So, and we don't, most of the time, don't have separate cell phones for personal use. So, yeah, all of my clients have my cell phone number. They all have my email address, and then they know what the rules are. They know what the boundaries are. It's really rare, even though I work with borderlines, it is really rare for me to have a client step outside those boundaries.
Can I ask another question too? I just wanted to add, talking about length and limits of therapy and termination. But my question is, I have been looking at these files from other counselors, and some are, like you said, just one page. I've seen some up to maybe 12 pages. Is there a sweet spot here that we should be looking for and coming up with something good?
It's more about the information. If you see that that what they're sharing is good information, then see how it would work into your personal story and your personal style of working on things. Mine is, I think it's 5 pages now. But there's a considerably healthy chunk, almost one whole page in there, about insurance. I don't take insurance. And so my clients need to know that up front. Actually, they know it in the initial phone call, because I tell them then, I don't accept insurance. Now what I will do if they want is there are forms that I can fill out that they can then submit to their insurance company, but they pay up front, and then they're responsible for submitting those forms to their insurance company. Most of my clients find out that their insurance company is not going to give them nearly as good a deal, because if I am filing to an insurance company, they have to be full fee. I cannot put somebody who's on a sliding scale. I can't file insurance benefits or give them a form to file insurance benefits if they're on sliding scale. And most of my clients find out that they do better off with the sliding scale than they do, that often their insurance company will pay less on their benefit than I'm accepting for a sliding scale. So it's strange, but but that's the way it works. And so that's almost one whole page of my consent to treat is taken up with explaining about insurance and payment and all of that kind of thing. And, you know, and if you miss payment 3 times, then I will probably turn it over to collections. And if you miss payment 3 times and we can't make arrangements to get that made up, to get that caught up, then I will give you referrals to other places, to your community mental health and places like that where maybe your fee would be less.
Thank you.
Sure. Okay. Any other questions? So, confidentiality, availability, fees and financials, what happens in case of a missed appointment, what is the expectation? And then, like Meg says, you do want to include some kind of paragraph that talks about the counseling process and that it can be difficult and that it can raise issues and problems that they were maybe not aware of. And this is a growing process. And it can be very difficult. It can be emotionally taxing. So it's important that we let clients know the reality of counseling. We can dig up some things that are really that the client didn't even think about when they first came in, and when we jump into those, I tell my clients, before we're done with this, you're going to wonder why you ever started it. And that's okay, because things are that old cliche, things are going to get worse before they get better. That's probably true if you're working. If you're working on growth, then things are going to get more cloudy and murky before they clear up. And so it's helpful for clients to know that it normalizes it. And then they'll come in and they'll tell me, you know, when you said I was going to question why I started this, well, I'm there. And so we'll talk about it, and we'll talk about why that feels like why it feels what it feels like to be in that place. And that's a good time for us to talk about goals. Where do you see yourself going? Where do you see yourself winding up? And this is how we get there. This is the process that we use to get there. All right. Any other questions about informed consent? Choose several and look them over, and then blend together the pieces that most fit your personality. Just be sure that you are including those crucial things. We have to include confidentiality. We have to include fees and payments. We have to include our availability. Those are all just things that are crucial for the client to know. If you're working with children or adolescents, you also have to include a section on what and how you will disclose to parents. So you need to think that through if you're doing work with children and adolescents. All right.
Can I cut in here really quick with a question?
Sure can.
So do you want stuff on the privacy practices? Because I know that's usually a different document from the informed consent, or maybe it isn't. I thought it was,
Mhm.
but maybe it isn't. Do you want that as part of the informed consent, or?
That's up to you. My informed
Okay.
consent does take does include a section on privacy. What I do to maintain privacy for my clients. But mainly that's because I don't want them to have to hassle with two separate documents. You know, if I go into a medical office, then I'm going to have to sign 2 or 3 different documents that apply to 2 or 3 different things. Um, you know, and the other thing is HIPAA document is always separate. HIPAA information is always separate. Um, but um, but I include that in my informed consent. Again, just because I don't want my client to have to, all of that's enough to wade through anyway, when you're maybe emotionally um, uh, upset anyhow. So I make that as gentle for them as I can. You know, there's some things that it's important for me to be sure that you know. And then typically I won't ask my clients to sign that consent form right then and there. I tell them, take this home and look through it and see if you have any questions and anything that we need to talk about next time. And then if it's okay, bring me back the signed. The last page is the page that they sign on the date. Bring me back your signed form. And that means we're entering into a counseling contract.
So something that's happened before with me in counseling intake sessions is normally they'll do, you know, like the first, whatever, 30 minutes, 40 minutes of the documentation.
Mhm.
And then the last 10 or 15 minutes is like, tell me what's going on with you. So if they're taking the informed consent home and entering into the contract with the signature after they've told you their story, then it seems like,
It's still going to be confidential as far as my first sessions are always consultations. The client does not pay for it. It's their opportunity to ask me anything that they want to ask me. It's my opportunity to see if it's somebody that I'm going to be able to work with and help the way they need to be helped. Because anymore, I'm on a more limited schedule and I have less availability in terms of sessions. And so, you know, sometimes I'll meet with somebody and I'll see, man, this person, they're going to need to meet with somebody a couple of times a week, at least initially. I can't do that. And so I need to help them find somebody who can. And I don't want them to have to pay for.
Yeah.
And I have colleagues who send their informed consent out as part of their intake assessment that they send out to clients. But to me, that just opens a can of worms. I want to have the client sitting in front of me. I want to be able to walk them through it, answer any questions that they have right then and there, rather than sending that document out and letting their imagination.
Oh yeah, and yeah, just get overwhelmed too.
Get overwhelmed. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
If they're anything like me, they just click accept without reading it, like terms of service.
Yeah, and then that's not good for them or good for me either. You're absolutely right, Justin. Oh, that's what I do to all the HIPAA forms anymore. They'll say, would you like a copy of the HIPAA form? No, thank you. I have my own collection. All right. Well, do you need to take a stretch? Need to stand up and stretch for a minute? Okay. Take a little bit of a stretch. We'll come back and talk about a case study. Oh no, I don't want to leave the meeting.
Hi.
You back?
Did everyone leave?
No, I'm still here too.
Yeah, they're coming back. There we go. See, we're getting everybody back. Give you a minute to stretch. All right. What I'm gonna do is show you a video of a case study. And my guess is we won't get all the way through the case study tonight. But what I would like for you to be able to do is, even as the video is playing, if you have a comment or an observation about what's going on with this doctor and this young man, then I want you to just go ahead and jump in, okay? And I can stop the video at any time, but I want to get your comments as much as possible. I want to give as much time to do that as possible. So let me get. Here. Oh. I'm going to click this so that everybody can share, which I think means that if you want to stop the video, you can click on it and stop the video and make a comment. Okay, now why are we not?
Do you want
There.
our comments in the chat or just to talk?
All right, why don't you just go ahead and talk? Okay, it does not give me that little message about, there we go. You have to be able to hear it for it to do any good. Now, let's try that.
My name is Dr. Stefan Mokrahysky. I'm a general pediatrician in a large pediatric clinic. I'm also one of the faculty for this campus-wide ethics course. Let me tell you about a case of mine. Some of the details have been changed to preserve confidentiality. I was seeing a new patient, JT, in my office for a routine sports physical. The family just transferred their care to my clinic during the last open enrollment. JT is a healthy 15-year-old. Our pediatric practice is very concerned about prevention, and we initiated a questionnaire to screen for adolescent risk factors. It's given to all our adolescent patients once a year. One of the questions is, have you ridden in a car with someone who has been drinking or using drugs? When I was about to enter the exam room, Deb, the nurse working with me that day, drew my attention to the fact that JT had answered that question, yes. During the course of my conversation with JT, he clarified his response, explaining that his dad has several DUI arrests and is on probation. The family car has a breathalyzer attachment, which prevents the car from starting if alcohol is detected on the breath. JT has his learner's permit and is learning to drive. By his report, he starts the car after breathing into the analyzer. Several times his dad has been drinking and has had JT start the car, and then the dad drives. Sometimes JT is in the car, never anyone else. JT was visibly upset relaying the story and asked me not to tell his mom, who had come with him and was in the waiting room.
I'm Bernie Karshmer, professor at the School of Dental Medicine and faculty in the campus-wide ethics course. Even though Dr. Mokrahysky had to figure out what to do in real time, let's pause the story to carefully consider the ethical issues and demonstrate how you can apply the 8-step process to this actual case.
Okay.
Well, JT is not safe doing that.
Okay. Okay.
Also, his father is deceiving local law enforcement by driving while having a DUI.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, so he's breaking the conditions of whatever his parole or whatever else is, his sentence is. Um, Anything else that you noticed? You know, that, would you all agree that that's the main problem? That um, uh, JT's dad violating the conditions of his release or whatever is endangering JT. So let's go back and watch. They're talking about, and you should have seen this in your. This should be something that you've seen in your book. The 8 steps of reviewing an ethical issue.
JT's situation certainly has ethical implications. I was thinking, should I honor JT's request to keep this confidential? Or should I deal with the potential harms by reporting this to someone? If so, who should I tell? I think this is a case of child abuse or neglect. I think I do have to report it. But how? Where should I start? With JT? With Mom in the waiting room? My gut reaction was to honor his request for confidentiality. Talk to him about the potential harms and trust him not to do this again. But then I thought, this is my schedule talking. I don't really have time to get into this. But the more I thought about it, the more concerned I became. There could be real harms if this continued. How could I live with myself if they got into an accident? After all, isn't that why we initiated the questionnaire in the first place? To be proactive in dealing with risks. I think this is child abuse and neglect, but how should I go about reporting it?
In every kind of careful decision making, we should start with the facts, and particularly in ethical decision making, when different parties can disagree about appropriate actions, sometimes the conflict can be resolved simply by clarifying the facts. What do we know from Dr. Mokrahysky's story? JT is a 15-year-old minor who depends on his parents to give consent for most types of care and to pay for the care. JT is healthy and is in the office for a routine sports physical. JT has told you that he sometimes blows into the breathalyzer to start the car when his dad has been drinking, and then his dad drives. His dad is on probation from the courts after several DUI arrests. JT's mom is in the waiting room, but JT has asked you not to tell her.
What facts do I need to gather to help me analyze my obligations? What does our questionnaire say about confidentiality? Did JT and his family receive any information about the limits of confidentiality? Does JT have capacity to be making decisions about his health care? Does JT's mother already know about this, or is she suspicious? Why did JT include the information on the questionnaire? Does he want help? Is JT's father ever violent when he's drunk? Does JT feel that he, his mother, or sister are physically in danger from their father? How often does his father ask him to do this? Is his father getting treatment for his alcohol use? If so, where? Does his father have a caseworker that could help? Is there a child abuse neglect reporting requirement?
There are two very real temptations when dealing with the facts. The first is to assume that you can't really analyze this case because all the facts are not known. But that's not necessarily true. You can clarify which facts are most important and why. Make assumptions and test how a change in facts would affect your final decision and its justification. The second temptation is to rest the entire analysis of this case on the final question about legal obligations. But there's a difference between ethics and law.
I'm Annie Harrington. I'm an attorney in Denver with a master's degree in bioethics, and I serve on the ethics committee at the Children's Hospital Colorado and also as a small group facilitator in this ethics course. I have been asked to comment on the legal issues in this case. It is very important to be aware of what the law says, if anything, about a particular situation. But don't confuse ethics and the law by letting concern for the law completely overshadow your evaluation of your ethical obligations. People tend to think that there is a big book of laws out there that, if you read it, will clearly tell you exactly what you have to do, or more importantly, not do. Yes, there are certainly laws established by Congress and state legislatures, and regulations by various state and federal agencies. But even these laws require interpretation. In fact, much of our law in the United States is called common law, meaning law that is developed in decisions by judges that are based on legal principles and precedent of courts at other tribunals, as opposed to statutes that are adopted through the legislative process or regulations issued by state or federal agencies. In this case, there is a Colorado state statute that relates to obligations to report abuse and neglect. Title 19 of the Colorado Revised Statutes defines child abuse or neglect as an act or omission that threatens the health or welfare of a child. The statute outlines several categories of harms, including physical harms, unlawful sexual behavior, emotional abuse, use of controlled substances around the child, and, quote, any case in which a child is in need of services because the child's parents, legal guardian, or custodian fails to take the same actions to provide adequate food, clothing, shelter, medical care, or supervision that a prudent parent would take, end quote. As you can tell, the statute contains a very broad definition of what constitutes abuse and neglect. And because the definition is not clear-cut, it is subject to a judicial interpretation. Title 19 also describes the people who are required by law to report child abuse and neglect to a county department or local law enforcement agency. All healthcare professionals are such mandatory reporters.
I'm Des Runyon. I'm a pediatrician with a master's degree and a doctorate in public health, and I also serve as the executive director of the Kemp Center for the Prevention and Treatment of Child Abuse and Neglect. I also serve as a small group facilitator in this ethics course. I've spent my career researching and teaching about how to prevent child abuse and how to help children recover not only from physical abuse, but from what the abuse does to their mental health. I'm glad we're beginning this course with a case that raises awareness about the legal and ethical issues. I'm sorry to say that there are a few too many healthcare professionals who fail to report suspected child abuse and neglect. It's important to realize that the law depends on professional judgment informed not only by knowledge of legal obligations, but also knowledge of ethical obligations. I think Dr. Mokrzycki has both a legal and an ethical obligation to report this case to the appropriate authorities. You don't have to be certain that abuse or neglect has occurred. You have to exercise reasonable judgment about your suspicions. I also think that some of the most important ethical issues come when you consider just how you're going to proceed. You need to consider how your reporting will respect JT and his family, as well as minimizing the risks of harm, both to JT and the rest of his family.
The law does have a strong interest in protecting vulnerable citizens, including children. Guided by the ethical principle of non-maleficence, meaning do no harm, some lawyers, including me and Don Bross, the lawyer with the Child Protection Team at Children's Hospital Colorado, would support Dr. Runyon in advising healthcare professionals that they should report this case. The father's actions could be considered abuse and neglect in that JT is exposed to risks when his father drives him while impaired. JT's health and welfare are jeopardized, and this is not the level of supervision of a prudent parent. Casey Frank, another attorney with a master's degree in public health, who is also a small group facilitator in this ethics course, raises additional legal concerns about the criminal behavior of the father in subverting the workings of the breathalyzer and in violating the conditions of his probation. Statistics show that alcohol in automobiles kill 40% more people than do firearms in homicides. Subverting the workings of the breathalyzer is a Class 1 misdemeanor. Colorado has a crime reporting law that is usually compulsory. The law states that it is the duty of every corporation or person who has reasonable grounds to believe that a crime has been committed to report promptly the suspected crime to law enforcement authorities. However, there are a number of exceptions to this requirement, including an exception in Colorado Revised Statutes, Section 18.8.115, stating that disclosure is not required of any communications that are privileged by law. Casey further states that to his knowledge, no one has ever been prosecuted for failing to report a crime. So, Dr. Mokrahysky may not have a requirement to report the father's criminal behavior. The state has to balance the importance of having healthcare professionals report all kinds of crime with the importance of maintaining confidentiality in the professional-patient relationship. Nevertheless, Casey does raise concerns about the criminal liability of the father and perhaps the reporting requirements of JT. What should Dr. Mokrahysky do, if anything, about this additional reporting requirement?
One of the most important values in healthcare is preventing harm. I have a duty to prevent the harms associated with underage drinking and driving, or riding in a car with a drunk driver. I also have an obligation to the general public to prevent the harms associated with drunk driving. Does this duty of non-maleficence mean that I tell the truth to the parents as well as to the authorities? But I also have an obligation to respect my patients. To me, that means that I educate my patients and respect their judgments about their health. That way I can empower them to be actively involved. Respect also means that I keep their trust by keeping things confidential. If I couldn't treat my adolescent patients confidentially, they would never tell me important things that allow me to help them. And helping my patients, beneficence, is probably the single most important value to me as a physician.
The heart of ethical analysis is the articulation of the values involved for each of the stakeholders. And these values don't necessarily have to be explicitly expressed by the individuals involved. They can be values belonging to the different health professionals as found in the codes of ethics, or values observed from the point of view of the person doing the analysis, or perhaps the values described in our readings. What are the values at stake in this case?
I also have obligations to my colleagues to respect their concerns and values. From the look that Deb gave me, I know that she's concerned as well. I should discuss this with her, since she's an important member of the healthcare team and has information and ideas to help make the best decision for JT and his family.
As a nurse, I have obligations to help my patients and keep them from harm if possible. I see too many of our adolescent patients end up with serious injuries or dead from risky behaviors like riding with drivers who are drunk or driving when they have been drinking. I feel strongly about preventing injuries, not just treating them when they happen. I was on the team that developed the adolescent screening tool that our clinic uses.
Okay, we're coming to the end of our time.
And I could use some help.
There we go. I'll post this PowerPoint under tonight's learning activity 1 so that you can watch the rest of this, because I think it's a really good one, and I think they break down each of the areas pretty clearly, the areas of concern. So just real quick, give me some of your feedback. What are your thoughts in a situation like this?
Dr. Adams, I was wondering, is there, with JT blowing into the breathalyzer for his father to drive, hypothetically, if his father were driving drunk and were to get into an accident and kill another motorist, would JT be liable for
an accessory?
An accessory?
Mm-hmm. That would depend on what the system in Colorado, how they wanted to pursue that. I think definitely there would be criteria there for filing charges, probably filing charges as a juvenile. Now, whether they would choose to do that because he seems to feel like he is being compelled to do that, coerced to do that. um, um, that they would take all of that. That opens another whole can of worms legally. But I would think that they would take that into account. Would strictly legally, is there reason to file charges against him if something would happen? Yes. What the legal system would determine, the one attorney talks about not just going by the law, but that there are ethics and law. And I think that would certainly be a situation where ethics and law would be I don't want to say opposed, but at least coming from different camps. Did that answer your question at all?
It just seems like that adds another layer to
It does.
the
It absolutely does.
the fact that this father is, I mean, just putting his son in an awful position, that there's abuse and some sort of neglect happening there.
Yeah. And what I think would happen is that because this is being reported as child abuse or neglect, what I think would happen is that the boy, the young man, would be that they would consider that to be part of the abuse, and they would consider him to be a victim. They would consider that to be victimization of him. Now that's what I think would happen. Again, you just don't know. Those are risks that you take. Other thoughts? Does it help to see them lay out the pieces of, okay, here's the legal aspect, here's an ethical aspect, here's the values aspect? Does that help to see those dialogued like that with a specific situation? Now, those are the same steps that we would take with any ethical quandary. Like I said, I'll post it so you can watch the rest of it and see the outcome, see what happens. Thoughts or questions? I'm sorry, we are out of time, and y'all are probably ready to get some dinner, get some rest, jump into something else. So, all right. Well, if there aren't any other questions or any concerns, I will get the grading done. I will post the video or the recording from tonight and post the PowerPoint, which should give you access to the case study. And thank you all for jumping in. You do not need to go into Blackboard and do the I was in class tonight thing. I kept a record of who's here, and I'll just go in and post your points. You don't, that's one thing that you don't have to, one more step you don't have to take. So I'll take care of that. Let me pray for us, and then we'll all head out. Father, sometimes it is hard for us to wrestle with and grasp the messes that we can get ourselves into. So just help each of us to be sound of mind, to not be fearful, to seek wise counsel in making decisions that impact the lives of others and that impact our lives. Thank you, Father, for the men and women who are sacrificing time and money, family effort to follow you into this field where things are not just black and white. There's a lot of confusion. The one thing that is always, always black and white is you said you won't leave us, you won't forsake us, and that you will supply what we need. So we count on you for that. Give us a good night's sleep and rest and restore our bodies, please, Father. And wherever we wake up tomorrow, just let us be surrounded with your love and your care, and open our eyes and our ears and our hearts to those around. We pray together in Jesus' name. Amen. All right.
Thank you, Mary.
I will see you guys in a couple of weeks on a virtual in week 5. All things considered, I hope to be on an outing with a couple of girlfriends that evening, and so I will be talking to you from the hotel, and I'll be looking forward to seeing you. Let me know if you have questions or if you have concerns or if there's anything that I can help with. Okay. All right. Night, everybody.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.